The subscription arbitrage era is basically over. First, it started with Anthropic, where they were blocking OAuth for open code and open Claude and basically any third-party tools. What that basically means is that you can't use your subscription with Claude to be able to use OpenClaw. Then after that, Google cut off their AI Ultra subscribers from being able to use OpenClaw. And then they also threatened Gmail and workspace access in the process. And lastly, it's kind of up in the air with how they're going to respond, right? Because OpenAI is now, has Peter Steinberger working for them. I think they've been a little bit more like liberal in their policy when it comes to using OpenClaw for your OpenAI subscription. But a lot of people do speculate that like basically the economics of being able to have the subscription for $20 a month just makes no sense if you're able to then tap in that OAuth token outside of just like their ecosystem, right? So another way to think about it, I always think of subscriptions as like a buffet, right? And if you go in and you can like eat a certain amount of food, basically buffets just calculate like how much is the average person going to be able to consume, and then they figure out like how to price their subscription. Well, now there's like a ton of more food that you could be eating at the buffet, and that food is extremely expensive, and you're almost taking it to other restaurants now, right? By taking your kids and going outside of the ecosystem. And so that's basically just kind of changing the way that all of these providers need to think about like how subscriptions work. So, I mean, I could speak even personally, right? I've got a Claude Max subscription that's $200 a month, but my token usage is in the hundreds of millions, right? And for every 1 million tokens of Claude is like $25. So let's say I'm at like 500 million tokens, 500 times 25, we're sitting at $12,500 that I would be spending on costs. Hopefully they don't kind of take away the auth token in that process. But yeah, that's kind of the issue that a lot of these providers are seeing. Yeah,
Wait,
and I think this also, yeah.
Ben, you're saying you're paying $200 per month, but you're spending about an equivalent of $12,500 per month in tokens? Like
I mean,
that's not a good.
yeah.
Why like that's not a good subscription management of them, right? They should just cap their token spending.
So there is also the cost of spending. There's the cost if I were to go and use the API directly, and that's the cost that I'm quoting, right? Which is like $12,000.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
if I don't know what their costs are to run these APIs, it might be 90% of that, right? In which case, maybe $12,000 comes out to be around $1,000, $1,200. I'm not sure what the margins are, but yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just like early phases of pricing things where it's all about just getting market share, and I'm sure they're running at a loss leader for a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, this is a really good chart too. Yeah, this is crazy. This is the first time I've seen something like this, but just the difference between how much one token or 1 million tokens used to cost with GPT-3 DaVinci, which was kind of the first OpenAI model that was somewhat useful, even though GPT 3.5 was really the one where people, ChatGPT came out from it. But it was $60 for 1 million tokens back then. And now if we look all the way to Llama 4, which is an open source model, it's 6 cents. So basically how much cheaper since 2020 token usage has gone down 850 times. 850 times, which I think also, yeah, I don't know if you guys have any other comments, but I wanted to even bring that to Moore's Law, which is towards the end of this slide or the pitch deck. Do you guys know about Moore's Law?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that? Go one more. I think it should be, well, maybe it got pushed.
Yeah, and it's not just the cost going down, but also the model is getting better. It's the inverse.
Yeah.
So Moore's Law, 8x cheaper in 6 years, halves every 24 months. The token costs 850x cheaper and halves every 8 months. And yeah, you see it here on the charts. Since 2020, 2021 to now, it literally became more than 100 times cheaper, if not close to 1,000.
And the cheaper it gets, then also so it's getting cheaper and smarter. So the amount of use cases it can actually accomplish is increasing, and then the cost to actually do those use cases is going down. So the more that happens, the more it unlocks, and then the more it will unlock profitably as well.
Yeah, and architecture gets better and people figure out how to combine things. And then you have these feedback loops of AIs being able to finally talk to each other. And all of this combined just, yeah, it's an not only an 850x token cost improvement, but I think also an 850x improvement in outputs. So that's incredible. Here is also all the frontier models, the pricing change basically on how back in Q1 2023, what was the price of OpenAI tokens of their frontier model, and then going down, like the frontier models always get cheaper and cheaper. OpenAI originally it was $30 to pay for the frontier model for 1 million tokens. Now it's 50 cents. Anthropic from $15 to $1. Google from $7 to 0.07. They all have different strategies, but they have the same destination, and the destination is, I think, that token price goes basically to zero over the next year or so. Then we haven't even talked about the open source models that are coming very close to the capabilities of these frontier models of the major AI labs. And that's maybe another question to discuss here. If we are thinking about the ethics of using OpenAI or using Claude or Anthropic with the thought of mass surveillance, but then we decide we don't want to use OpenAI because they're doing mass surveillance or they're checking on our data, so we move to open source models. But if we're not running them locally but in the cloud, then all our data goes to China. So it's kind of a funny double-edged sword as well. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, like, this partly ties into what I said before, is that like these open source models are most of the time being distilled based on the latest closed source models. So by making better closed source models, we are giving better distilling options to the open source models. I think the only way for people to actually counter what's happening with their data is the OpenClaw route, is having your user info, your data in your own environment, whether that's locally or on a VPS, and then switching out your model depending on which you would like to use. I think the open source models are going to be fantastic for the kind of low intelligence tasks that you want to automate that don't really need much thinking to do, because they're going to be they're basically free, and you don't need to use a super smart model to make basic calls and basic kind of daily tasks. And in the closed models, I personally would want to use the latest one, even if it costs more. And I just see that cost becoming less of an issue over time. Just like mobile internet data, it used to cost so much more for 1 gig of data on your mobile phone, and today most plans come unlimited.
Yeah, that chart was fascinating about also just looking at Google. Like, Google is significantly cheaper than the other two options, right? And I'm so curious to know what's happening in Google's like C-suite, that they're really leaning into like cheaper models. Is it cheaper, like, is it cheaper for them to run? Is it the fact that they own the full stack, right? They own TPUs, so they actually own the hardware, whereas Anthropic and OpenAI, they don't own their own AI silicon, right? But or is it the fact that they're thinking, well, if we want to embed this into literally every part of our ecosystem, whether it's the Google workspace, and everything that comes along with that, we need to make this super cheap. But to me, it's fascinating how like OpenAI and Anthropic are kind of more or less pricing things similarly, but then Google is just significantly cheaper. Ever since I think it was like Gemini 2.5 Flash, they've just gone down in price a lot. They're basically open source price